nervous to share pay bands or salary ranges to your employees, I want to say it's not your employees that need fixing. It's your structure. Because when we hide pay, we're probably hiding inconsistency, insecurity, and the truth of how we value our people financially. Welcome to Don't Waste the Chaos. I'm your host, Kerri Roberts, and today we're going to get into the monies, which you know I love talking about. And I am not talking about legislation. I'm not weighing in on whether or not you should be required to put your pay bands in a job posting. That's not what I'm talking about. Honestly, I don't really care about that. I do have an opinion. I think when you appropriately post your pay bands and your pay ranges and your job postings, you're going to attract the right candidates. And if your argument is, well, I don't want to post the range and then I could have gotten a deal on somebody, how are you determining what the role is worth in the first place? We're going to get into that and so much more in today's episode. But let me give you a little backstory. I've been doing HR and people operations and compensation data studies since 2008. I love digging into the numbers and building clarity around how pay works. And the biggest part of all of this is just the intentionality of it all. And when you have intentionality, it turns out all of a sudden you get a lot more confident about talking about it. But when you aren't intentional with your process, now you feel like I don't really want to talk about it, but you're going to blame it on the people aspect when really it's a you problem. Here's why pay transparency is such a hot HR and leadership topic right now, and why so many leaders are avoiding it. And that is because I don't even know why I have to explain this. This is people's money. And yeah, we've got legislation going on about this. And, some states are requiring it now in their job ads and things like that. That's not why it's a hot topic. This is just people's money. And we have got a trust issue in business. I spoke on trust a couple of weeks ago to a group of about 140 people. I'm speaking on trust to a group of 130 or 140 leaders on December 4th. I'm talking about trust a lot. And here's what's interesting. Never does an organization reach out to me and say, will you come and talk about trust? But what happens is I sit down with the leadership team, executive ownership team, whatever that looks like. And they're like, hey, we've got a retreat coming up or blah, blah, blah. We're having issues with change management. We're having issues with culture. We're having issues with X, Y, and Z, performance, whatever it is. And when we get down to the heart of it, I'm not saying every time, because sometimes we just need to talk about other things. But so often lately, the trend that I'm seeing is we're having a rupture in trust in organizations. And that's causing tons of other issues. Compensation and the clarity around it, the transparency around it is another way where we're constantly breaking trust, and leaders are avoiding it because they don't have a systematic approach to their compensation strategy. By the end of this episode, you're going to understand what transparent pay really means, what's the risk if you don't get it, and how you can start small. And of course, yes, I'll talk about a way that I can help you get there if you need the help. So according to Aon's 2025 Global Pay Transparency Study, only 19% of organizations feel that they are ready for pay transparency. I believe that. That's not a surprise to me, but 19% is low. And here's what I would say. If you fall into that other, 81%, which I'm sure you do, what are you doing about it? What are you doing about it right now to get ready? Because not being transparent about pay, and I'm not saying like, hey, Susie, Daniel over here is making X, Y, and Z. I don't mean that. I just mean saying, here's our pay philosophy. Here's the range for this role. Here's the range if you increase in responsibilities. Here's how you make more money. Here's our philosophy. If the budget is balanced, if we have the top line revenue we need, if our EBITDA is looking good, then here's what our annual pay increase strategy looks like. Not guaranteeing anything, but here's what it looks like. You will be able to recruit and retain better. Only 19% of organizations feel that they're ready for pay transparency. So what are you doing to get there? Also, 69% of organizations publish salary bands when recruiting. That's interesting to me. So if 19% feel like they're ready for pay transparency, and that was in the same study, but 69% are publishing salary bands when recruiting. If I'm guessing, the recruiter or maybe HR is throwing up a pay band, but has no real pay strategy behind it, which is why we're not ready for pay transparency. Just very interesting to me. So we are still in the early days of all of this, and many organizations have structural issues hiding behind pay secrecy. So let's get a little bit deeper into it. Why does pay transparency feel so dang risky in an organization? I think pay transparency is scary for leadership based off of what I've seen in my 20 years of experience and then my client work, is because it oftentimes, and I'm saying oftentimes in a gentle way, every single time that I have seen a lack of pay transparency, it's because there's inconsistency or inequity or unclear historic decisions that are now still implicating people's pay, and there's silos. So all of these reasons, inconsistency, inequity, historic decisions are weird, and then the silos. That's usually why leadership is not wanting to have pay transparency. When you publish ranges or you reveal how pay is decided, you invite scrutiny, right? Why does so-and-so make more than this person? What metrics are you using? Why did you deviate from that? I'm not saying that you need to post on your wall or on your company intranet site what everyone makes. That's not what I mean by pay transparency. Often pay decisions have been arbitrary. I get it. Or they're legacy based, or they're based on what we've always done. Or this owner hired this person, didn't run it through HR, didn't run it through the process. They're getting paid who knows what, $25,000, what anybody else in that equivalent role is making. It's shining a light on systems that are weak. And what happens is because we don't have a decision maker who comes in and takes the bull by the horns and says, we are going to develop a clear strategy around this. And it's not going to fix everything overnight. We're not going to go demoting people and promoting people and level setting our pay in 1 year, because that's going to throw our budget off. That is not what a smart HR person or payroll person is going to recommend. What I do when I go in an organization is I do a compensation data study. Sometimes people just want me to do that. Okay, I can do that. What I'd rather do, though, is do that as your first step. And then the next step is then I would give you my recommendations on how to level set this. So we have to have performance conversations. So this dovetails into performance management, performance review process. And then we have to take a look at the budget. I create pools of how we can level set this. And I'm also analyzing job descriptions and job titles, because most of the time we've got a handful of people who are mistitled, either an overinflated title, which is why their pay is lower, or they're making way more. So we need to give them more responsibility. Can they handle it? Well, that's the person's problem. They're getting paid way more. We either need to demote them and level set them in their role, which oftentimes doesn't go super well, but I can give a strategy for that. Or we need to increase the responsibilities to match the pay band and increase their title, and then see if they can perform to that. And if they can't, we'll reassess in 60 to 90 days. There's a lot that goes into that. And then I also will add on raise pools and buckets to help you forecast what your increased budget would be year over year. I'm saying increase because most generally it would be an increase. It might be a decrease, though. I've got to get in and take a look at your information, but this is going to shine a light on your weak system. It's just highly probable if only 19% of organizations say that they're ready for pay transparency, it's because you've got weak systems. And so doing this work exposes the weak system, sure, but we're not going to tell everybody that it's a weak system. What we're going to do internally, and when I say internally, usually it's the company owner that I'm working with and maybe the CFO, high-level executive team. We're not even going to tell all of HR what's going on. I don't even know if you have a huge HR department. Maybe you don't even have one at all, which is part of the problem. But we're going to keep this information very small, and we're going to create a systematic approach, likely 3 years, maybe 5-year approach on how we're going to make this work well. And then you're going to stay inside the lines. Or otherwise, this is going to happen every couple of years. It's going to stay wobbly forever. Legacy-based, arbitrary, what we've always done, letting so-and-so go rogue because they're the owner, they used to be the owner or whatever. It'll knock that stuff off. Do you want that? Do you want a systematic approach in your business? Maybe you don't. I can't really think of why you wouldn't, other than this sounds hard, but if you get the right partner to come alongside you, it's not that hard. I promise you. I do the heavy lift. You just have to nod your head essentially and say, yes, we see the benefit of this. We're going to invest in this. and we're going to change our practices moving forward. According to a Willis Towers Watson 2025 pay transparency survey, 82% of United States organizations are either sharing or planning to share individual pay ranges with employees or job candidates. So 82% of companies plan to do this. Some of them are, but some of them are planning to do it. And I would just ask, I wonder what they're doing to plan to do that. That 82% suggests high intention, but keep in mind, intention versus readiness versus alignment of leadership and HR, those are completely different things. I had a client say, if I share salary bands, recruiters will just pick off our people. And yes, that could happen, but often the bigger risk is internal distrust, disengagement, and people quietly job hunting because they see pay bands posted for other roles. And also, if you've got a pay band posted, here's what happens. Gosh, I have so much to say about this. I could just hop all over the place. I'm trying to stay organized here. If you've got a pay band posted and somebody's paid at the lower end of that, are they going to be thrilled? Maybe, maybe not. Do they have a realistic expectation of their own performance? Have you been appropriately assessing their performance? Have you really let them know how they are performing? If you haven't, they might have an unrealistic expectation of them being, a unicorn. And then they might wonder, well, why am I paid at the low end of this pay band? And if they're paid at the low end of the pay band, do you have structure in place to show how to get to the next level? When I did this as an organization, I did an employee engagement survey. It showed that the leaders weren't trusted. The leaders were pissed because they felt like they were very transparent. But some of it came down to things like this. They were transparent as far as if you asked them a question, they were going to be blunt. But that's not systematic transparency. That's a personality. But my point was to them, how many of your employees feel confident coming to you and asking these questions? So only a couple of people feel comfortable with you to ask these questions. And then only those people are getting the answers. And then people feel like those people are the favorites if they know that those people have more information. There's just all kinds of issues with this. Let's create a systematic approach. But when I did their compensation data study, and I saw these discrepancies and I sat down with the three owners of this organization. It was a law firm. And I said, okay, guys, this person's paid here. This person's paid here. Why is this an $18,000 pay gap? And they said, well, this person's been doing it for X amount of years. We can hand off to them and they run with it. Whereas this person, we have to spoon feed. They don't do near as much, and I was like, great. Then we need to have tiers in your job titles. And then that person knows exactly what we'll do is, we'll segment out, okay, at the beginning, you get this pay and you're doing these level of responsibilities. But when you pick up these level of responsibilities or you've completed these certifications or these licenses or whatever, then you can make this. And it really motivates people who are growth oriented, which by the way, the younger generation is. It motivates them to move up and they see I can move up and here's how I move up. So I need to master this and they can stay more focused. I need to master what I'm currently doing and be successful at all of these tasks because I know our performance management process is going to indicate that or not. And then when I've mastered all these tasks, then I get to shoot for this, this, and this, and I get a pay increase. And now I'm excited and now I'm engaged and now I feel like I have a future here. This will not cure all the world's problems in your organization, but friends, this is going to do so much for you and your organization. I'm telling you, this is not HR BS. This is not just for a payroll specialist. This is changing your organization and the engagement of your people. And if you've listened to my podcast at all in the past, you know the data and the stats on engagement. More engaged employees are, I've seen data all over the place, but on average, 38% more productive and more efficient. That's going to positively impact your bottom line. This matters. The biggest risk of not doing this is internal distrust, disengagement, and people quietly job hunting. So the fear of transparency often comes not from what employees will do. It comes from what we'll be forced as an organization to answer for. Why don't we have a better approach to this? But the thing is, when you do a compensation data study, the data starts to tell you a story and you can build an approach from that. There are structural issues that happen behind this avoidance. You can't talk about transparency without talking about your compensation structure, how you evaluate jobs, pay grades, salary bands, performance metrics. If those are weak and inconsistent, your transparency is going to expose you. So I understand why so many of you aren't ready for transparency in this area, because you don't have good job evaluation process. You don't do maybe job analysis. You don't have pay grades. You don't have salary bands. You don't have performance metrics. You don't have organizational goals that roll down to cascading department goals that roll down to individual performance metrics. Many organizations still don't have robust job evaluation processes. And I get that. In Aon's 2025 study, just 44% of organizations have robust job evaluation processes in place and use them consistently. 44% of organizations, that's less than half. In 2025, with AI and with all of our HR payroll system automations and all of these things accessible to us, I would just say there's not really an excuse for this other than you've been trying to run your business, but know better, do better, right? Like once you learn and you get exposed to this and you recognize the value in it, let's freaking act. Also from that same study, 29% of organizations reported their level of pay transparency readiness has not improved in the last 12 months. So they've said that they are going to be more transparent, like 82 or 83%. But 29% of those said that nothing's improved in the last 12 months to get them ready for that. There are also legal and regulatory changes that add pressure to this, like the state laws that I mentioned requiring salary ranges and job postings. I see organizations who have started to adopt this, but there is no systematic approach and it's causing disruption. So a recruiter who's kind of detached from the people who are doing the tasks, right? The frontline workers, the employees, a recruiter posts a pay band. And, maybe they're getting the pay band from HR who's developing pay bands, but not communicating those to employees. Or maybe they're just taking a look at what other people have gotten paid in the role. Or maybe they're just literally hopping into AI or looking on salary.com and they're just arbitrarily putting a pay band out there. And then people who are in the role already see the job posted in the pay band and they're like, what the hell? And then recruiters then aren't sharing open positions with our current employees because they don't want current employees to be reading the job description and reading the pay bands. But the best way to get a good fitting employee is through employee referrals. And so do you see the breakdown? This is just a constant cascading breakdown because you have an inconsistent structure. And then we've got rising regulations, and then we've got rising employee expectations. This is a perfect alignment for transparency pressure. Employees are saying, hey, I don't trust you because you're not being transparent. And the organization is like, I'm not being transparent because I'm nervous about you and how you're going to handle it. Transparency helps with trust, helps with retention, and helps with fairness, which matters in people ops. When I talk to people about doing people operations, to me, I've talked on the podcast before, human resources to me is just wholly resourcing. I am resourcing organizations to be more effective in serving their people, all the cradle to grave, right? From recruitment to termination. That's what I'm doing. That's what people operations is. Transparency in your organization is going to help with trust, retention, and fairness. I've got a construction client right now that doesn't have a handbook and doesn't have a lot of policies and procedures. And, their argument to me was they don't want to be corporate and they don't want people to feel like they're changing. But yet they're hiring people from other organizations and they've got a lot of internal unrest. Now they've got loyalty because they like the way the company is running, but then people are grumbling. So they're disgruntled, but they're not leaving, because they've got cool benefits and flexibility, and it's a neat environment for a lot of ways, but then the business foundation is lacking. It's causing major issues. It's causing trust ruptures. I've conducted a compensation data study for a company who found out that pay for similar roles across two departments varied by more than 38%. Once we published ranges and offered consistent criteria, turnover dropped just by doing those simple things. We didn't have to do anything huge. We literally looked behind the scenes, analyzed the data, and then put some structure in place with it and published those ranges. and gave consistent criteria across those two departments. And over the course of a year, we saw turnover drop. Now you could say that was ironic. I mean, sure, I'll take it, whatever the reason, I'll take it. But all I can say is I was brought in, here's what I put in place, and here's the improvement in the data that I saw. Let's talk about what pay transparency really means. Transparency does not mean seeing everyone's salary, unless your culture allows it. Now, I've worked for a public university system actually, and that was published, which was wild. I didn't really love that, but I also didn't really hate it. It was interesting. That's not what I'm talking about. If your business is not federally funded and publicly traded and doesn't require that, that's not what I'm talking about. Here's what it means. Publishing salary bands or ranges for roles internally and externally, not just externally in your job postings, internally. It's also creating clear criteria for how pay moves happen, like promotion or based on tenure or based on performance, and saying what it is based on and how it does work. It's communicating how pay decisions are made, not saying we gave this person a promotion and here's how much they got, just in general, how are pay decisions made, and giving employees the why behind the numbers. We want to be gentle in our posture here. We want to mean that you're open to this, but so gentle in the way that we're presenting it, but strong in our purpose. We're not going to dump this information, too much information out that employees can't handle, but we're going to be intentional, meaning we've got the data and we've got the structure. Affirmity, in their Future of Pay Equity Transparency 2025 report, one finding was that 38% of organizations hadn't conducted a pay equity analysis in the prior 12 months. So 38% of organizations hadn't even looked at their pay structure in 12 months. Now, we've obviously got cost of living adjustments going on. That's based on inflation, expectations going on, shifting in job roles because of AI and all of that. And this year, 38% of the organizations said in the last 12 months, they haven't even looked at their pay. So I want to give you a step-by-step small plan to start this. You look at it, I'm going to do 4 steps here. The first one is you look at the data first. Conduct or commission a compensation study to map out current pay versus market versus internal equity. Here's how I personally do it. I've partnered with a company since 2008 is when I met this company. And usually I will hop companies around, but this one has been so consistent, and they get their pay data internationally. And they base it off of demographic and tenure and education and time in the role. And they're pulling this data from major players in the HR payroll technology space. So I trust this data. They've got access to more data than I've seen. Do not go on salary.com. And if you're going to do it on AI, that's a starting place. But I pay several $1,000s. Not a couple, several $1,000s to have access to this study, because they also update it every day. So the data is live. It's not a once a year published salary data that's pulling. So I pull the data role by role by role. So if I'm working with you, and I'll just tell you my exact process, because you're not going to do it. And if you do, bless you. I'm so glad you did. And that's going to positively impact your people. But I don't mind giving away my pudding here or how the sausage is made, because I know you're doing your work and you probably don't have time for this or access to my tools and data. But if you do, I'm so glad this podcast episode helped you. Please go leave me a review and say, Kerri gave such transparent, step-by-step, clear advice that I could literally go and change my business today. Please leave me that review. That's all I'm asking of you. Here's some free knowledge. So I have you send me a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet has each person's name, each person's job title, each person's start date. And if you don't put a formula in there for tenure, I'll add that. And then their current pay. And what I like to do is get access to all of your job descriptions. But if you don't have those, that's a separate conversation. But I like to have access to all your job descriptions too. Then I want a column for notes, and I want you to tell me when the last time they got a pay increase was. That's it. You should be able to pull a canned report out of your HR payroll system to give me that. And if you don't have an HR payroll system, there's affordable ones out there. Let me holler at you about that. But even if you don't have it, however you pay payroll, whether it's through QuickBooks or Gusto, or if you have an accountant that does it for you, they should be able to queue up this report for you pretty easily, low lift. And if they can't, they're not doing a very good job. You should look for somebody else. So that data, that's all I need from you. We don't even have to talk. You just give me that data and then I get started. And the price varies, of course, depending on how many you've got in your organization. 50 and below is one chunk, and then I go up from there. So 50 employees, by the way. So I take every single person's role, tenure included, and I do this based off of your industry as well and your revenue. So that way I'm making it applicable to a business of your size in your industry, in your location. And if it's a remote organization, I ask you, where do you want me to benchmark this to? Do you want me to benchmark it to Dallas, Texas? Or do you want me to benchmark it to Hannibal, Missouri? Are you wanting to go on the low end or the high end? Or I can duplicate the report and show you the difference. So from there, I am going to plot the 10th percentile, the 25th percentile, the median, the 75th, and the 90th percentile for this role in this industry at this level of revenue with this level of experience. And then I'm going to take what the person that you gave me is currently making, and I'm going to highlight the box where they fit. And I'm going to do that with every single person. That's my very first blush. Then from there, I'm going to look for outliers. First, I'm going to look for a trend. Where in general are your people paid? Are they underpaid? Are they overpaid? Are they median? So I'm going to start putting together a report for you. And then we're going to open up dialogue. So that's going to take me a few weeks to get that work done. Then we're going to open up a dialogue. We're going to have an initial meeting, and I'm going to share with you or whomever is appropriate in your organization. Here's where people are getting paid. Do you like this? Do you feel proud of yourself based on the data? Do you feel like, oh, I'm glad we're looking at this, what's the initial feeling? We're just going to level set. It's just me and you. I'm not going to tell anybody else this. Nobody else needs to know, because we're going to put a plan in place. People need to know the plan as appropriate, but they don't need to know where you fall today. We're just starting this. We're going to make this right. We're going to work on this together. We're not going to break the bank either. If your revenue is low in your organization, I'm going to help you cut people from this list and make some money. So it's just going to inform so many things. So from there, we're going to talk about where you land and what your current compensation strategy looks like. It looks like you're currently paying around the 25th percentile. Now I'm going to ask you some other questions. What are your benefits look like? Let's talk about total compensation. Let's talk about flexibility and what you provide for your people. Maybe it's appropriate for you to pay at the 25th percentile because your benefits are so excellent or your flexibility is so excellent. Like, why do people want to come work for you and why do people stay? And I recommend stay interviews for those to get that data, or engagement or satisfaction surveys. But why do you think that is? And maybe it's okay for us to pay people here. Or maybe you're paying them at the 75th percentile. And I'm going to say, is this because this is an overly competitive market? Or you don't offer good benefit? We're going to have an open dialogue. And then I'm going to also point out your outliers to you. Okay, so based on your compensation strategy that we've identified together, then here's the people who are above and here's the people who are below. What are we doing here? The people who are above, do they have increased responsibilities? Is their job description appropriate? Is their job title appropriate? And if they're below, do they deserve that? Are they a low performer? Should we actually be cutting them? Should we be demoting them? What does this look like? So we're going to make a plan for our outliers. And then I'm going to ask you, okay, I've looked at everybody's last pay increases. Some people it was 7 years ago. Some people it was 1 year ago. Some people it was 2 months ago. Some people never, because they get bonus structure. And we'll talk about bonus and commission and stuff like that too. Total compensation, total rewards. And then based on all of that, I will say, if I were you, to retain these people, to get our underperformers in the right buckets, to get people who are getting underpaid that need to be increased for us to retain them, here's what I think you need to bump everybody up to, or drop, or adjust, or performance reviews. Here's what your bucket could be in the next year. And let's put performance reviews on the schedule. And if you need help developing those or building those out, I will help you with that too. And then we're not going to fix it all in 1 year because I don't want to throw your budget out of whack. I'm going to ask you, what's your P&L looking like and what's your percentage of on your P&L, what's compensation and benefits look like for your P&L? Are you completely out of whack there? We're going to have a deep conversation. This is rich. This is the data. We're going to map your current pay versus the market versus your internal equity. That's just the data piece. The second thing that I'm going to do, or I'm going to recommend you do, is start doing banding and job evaluation, building out salary bands. So we've done all of this initial data piece. Then we're going to say, okay, for these job titles, here's the current band. Is this appropriate? Do we need to bump people up, down, change roles, what have you? Be consistent with our job descriptions and our job titling. And then we're going to build our salary bands. We're going to link those bands to job evaluations and clearly articulate our criteria. Like I mentioned with the law firm I worked with before, it was amazing. We had paralegals and we did multiple tiers of those. And people were so pumped. They were so pumped to know how they could grow. Like they were so excited. And we're going to articulate those career ladders or those criteria. People are going to get excited. Then we're going to communicate. So we're going to look at the data first. Then we're going to do the banding and the job evaluations. Then we're going to communicate. Internally, we're going to say, here are the ranges. Here's how you move through the ranges, and here's how we reward performance. Here's how we do promotions. And then the fourth thing we're going to do is incremental transparency around this. You start with posting the ranges in the job ads and saying it internally. And then we start with these open conversations over time. At one client, we posted ranges on the job ads. Then within 90 days, we shared the ranges at the internal level with the career ladders in place. And like I mentioned earlier, that's the place that turnover in the department dropped. And it was by 12% in 6 months. So if you're not comfortable showing your pay bands, you're not discussing pay transparency, and you're avoiding structural accountability, there are things you can do about it. It might sound complicated, but just finding the right partner to come alongside you would be great. Or maybe your HR person, you need to send them this episode and have your HR person jump into this process. It can be done. So here's how to start small and let it scale. You don't need a full overhaul overnight. You need intention and consistency. So we're humble in the posture of this, but we're strong in the purpose. So publish your salary ranges in your next job posting. Conduct one internal audit for a single job family, maybe. Maybe it's in accounting or finance or operations. Do that this quarter. Hold a pay transparency Q&A with your leadership or your people team, like your HR people leadership team, and walk them through how pay is set and ask if there's any questions, or ask them how pay is set. How are department heads, if the onus is on department heads to pick what the role is going to get paid, how are they determining that? How would HR like them to determine that? How is HR determining that? Get everybody in the same room and have that conversation, and then do the compensation data study to benchmark versus market and ensure fairness. In a Willis Towers Watson survey, the one I was referencing earlier, 82% of U.S. companies are either sharing or planning to share those individual pay raises. And if your questions are, is this going to cause internal jealousy or turnover? The answer is maybe. But the bigger cost is disengagement when pay feels secret, unfair, or arbitrary. What if competitors poach when they see what your pay ranges are? My answer to that is, if your ranges are competitive and you're transparent, you'll attract more authenticity and loyalty. And if you're ready to get into this, this is where my compensation data study can come in, because you need real world benchmark data, internal equity diagnostics, and a roadmap to share ranges with confidence. And I'll make sure to link in the show notes how you can get in touch with me about that. Here's what I'd like for you to reflect on. What's one department or one level in our organization where you could publish a salary range this quarter? You might have one department where it's like, actually, this is very clear how we pay. And then we have other departments that are a little more ambiguous. Where's one place where you could start? Pay transparency is not a trend. It's a structural shift. And if you're nervous about it, the root cause isn't your employees and worrying about how they're going to act. It's your structure. I want you to do the data work. I want you to build your structure. And the data work, as a reminder, is that audit and benchmarking. I want you to build out your structure, job evaluations, pay bands, your criteria. And then I want you to communicate and start small by posting pay ranges, start talking honestly internally with your leadership team, with HR, and lead with transparency. And if you want help with the data piece, my compensation data study can give you clarity and confidence. So reach out. It's saltandlightadvisors.com/contact. And if you're ready to build that foundational HR infrastructure that supports transparency and fairness, you can check out my HR in a Box offering as well. And that's saltandlightadvisors.com/HR in a box. Because people deserve to know how you value them, and your business deserves the trust that comes with it, you need to do this work. I know it can feel like chaos, but your people deserve to know how much you value them. I know you value them. This is one way to show it. So don't waste the chaos. Embrace it. Until next time.